Don Juan by Lord Byron. Read by Peter Gallagher. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Canto 1, Part 1. I want a hero. An uncommon want, when every year and month sends forth a new one, till after clawing the gazettes with cant, the age discovers he is not the true one. Of such as these I should not care to vaunt. I'll therefore take our ancient friend Don Juan. We've all seen him in the pantomime, sent to the devil somewhat ere his time. Vernon, the butcher Cumberland, Wolfe, Hawke, Prince Ferdinand, Granby, Burgoyne, Keppel, Howe, evil and good have had their tithe of talk, and filled their signposts then, like Wellesley now. Each in their turn, like Banquo's monarchs stalk, followers of fame, 9 Pharaoh of that sow. France too had Bonaparte and Dumouriez, recorded in the Moniteur and Courrier. Barnave, Brissot, Condorcet, Mirabeau, Pétion, Cloutz, Danton, Marat, Lafayette were French and famous people, as we know. And there were others, scarce forgotten yet. Joubert, Hoche, Marceau, Lannes, Desaix, Moreau, with many of the military set, exceedingly remarkable at times, but not at all adapted to my rhymes. Nelson was once Britannia's god of war, and still should be so, but the tide has turned. There's no more to be said of Trafalgar. 'Tis with our hero quietly inurned, because the army's grown more popular, at which the naval people are concerned. Besides, the prince is all for the land service, forgetting Duncan, Nelson, Howe, and Jervis. Brave men were living before Agamemnon, and since, exceeding valorous and sage, a good deal like him too, though quite the same none. But then they shone not on the poet's page, and so have been forgotten. I condemn none, but can't find any in the present age fit for my poem, that is, for my new one. So, as I said, I'll take my friend Don Juan. Most epic poets plunge in medias res. Horace makes this the heroic turnpike road, and then your hero tells, whene'er you please, what went before, by way of episode, while seated after dinner at his ease beside his mistress, in some soft abode, palace or garden, paradise or cavern, which serves the happy couple for a tavern. That is the usual method, but not mine. My way is to begin with the beginning. The regularity of my design forbids all wandering as the worst of sinning, and therefore I shall open with a line, although it cost me half an hour in spinning, narrating somewhat of Don Juan's father, and also of his mother, if you'd rather. In Seville was he born, a pleasant city, famous for oranges and women. He who has not seen it will be much to pity, so says the proverb, and I quite agree. Of all the Spanish towns, none is more pretty. Cadiz, perhaps, but that you soon may see. Don Juan's parents lived beside the river, a noble stream, and called the Guadalquivir. His father's name was Jose, Don, of course, a true hidalgo free from every strain of Moor or Hebrew blood. He traced his source through the most Gothic gentleman of Spain. A better cavalier ne'er mounted horse, or being mounted ere got down again, than Jose, who begot our hero, who begot... but that's to come. Well, to renew, his mother was a learned lady, famed for every branch of every science known in every Christian language ever named. With virtues equalled by her wit alone, she made the cleverest people quite ashamed, and even the good with inward envy grown, finding themselves so very much exceeded in their own way by all the things that she did. Her memory was a mine. She knew by heart all Calderon and the greater part of Lope, so that if any actor missed his part, she could have served him for the prompter's copy. For her, finagles were an useless art, and he himself obliged to shut up shop. He could never make a memory so fine as that which adorned the brain of Donna Inez. Her favourite science was the mathematical. Her noblest virtue was her magnanimity. Her wit, she sometimes tried at wit, was Attic. All her serious sayings darkened to sublimity. In short, In all things she was fairly what I call a prodigy. Her morning dress was dimity, her evening silk, or in the summer muslin, and other stuffs, with which I won't stay puzzling. She knew the Latin, that is the Lord's Prayer, and Greek, the alphabet, I'm nearly sure. She read some French romances here and there, although her mode of speaking was not pure. For native Spanish she had no great care, at least her conversation was obscure. Her thoughts were theorems, her words a problem, as if she deemed that mystery would ennoble them. She liked the English and the Hebrew tongue, and said there was analogy between them. She proved it somehow, out of sacred song, but I must leave the proof to those who've seen him. But this I heard her say, and can't be wrong, and all may think which way their judgments lean 'em. 'Tis strange the Hebrew noun, which means I am, the English always use to govern damn. Some women use their tongues. She looked a lecture, each eye a sermon and her brow a homily, and all in all sufficient self-director, like the lamented late Sir Samuel Romilly, the law's expounder and the state's corrector, whose suicide was almost an anomaly. One sad example more that all is vanity. The jury brought their verdict in insanity. In short, she was a walking calculation, Miss Edgeworth's novels stepping from their covers, or Mrs. Trimmer's books on education, or Caleb's wife set out in quest of lovers. Morality's prim personification, in which not envy's self a flaw discovers. To others' share let female errors fall, for she had not even one. The worst of all. Oh, she was perfect, past all parallel of any modern female saint's comparison. So far above the cunning powers of hell, her guardian angel had given up his garrison. Even her minutest motions went as well as those of the best timepiece made by Harrison. In virtues, nothing earthly could surpass her, save thine incomparable oil, Macassar. Perfect she was, but as perfection is insipid in this naughty world of ours, where our first parents never learnt to kiss till they were exiled from their earlier bowers, where all was peace and innocence and bliss, I wonder how they got through the 12 hours. Don Jose, like a lineal son of Eve, went plucking various fruit without her leave. He was a mortal of the careless kind, with no great love for learning or the learned, who chose to go where'er he had a mind, and never dreamed his lady was concerned. The world, as usual, wickedly inclined to see a kingdom or a house o'erturned, whispered he had a mistress. Some said 2. But for domestic quarrels 1 will do. Now, Donna Inez had, with all her merit, a great opinion of her own good qualities. Neglect, indeed, requires a saint to bear it, and such indeed she was in her moralities, but then she had the devil of a spirit, and sometimes mixed up fancies with realities, and let few opportunities escape of getting her liege lord into a scrape. This was an easy matter with a man oft in the wrong, and never on his guard, and even the wisest do the best they can, have moments, hours, and days so unprepared that you might brain them with their lady's fan. And sometimes ladies hit exceeding hard, and fans turn into falchions in fair hands. And why and wherefore, no one understands. 'Tis pity learned virgins ever wed with persons of no sort of education, or gentlemen who, though well born and bred, grow tired of scientific conversation. I don't choose to say much upon this head. I'm a plain man, and in single station. But, oh, ye lords of ladies intellectual, inform us truly, have they not henpecked you all? Don Jose and his lady quarrelled. Why? Not any of them any could divine, though several thousand people chose to try. 'Twas surely no concern of theirs, nor mine. I loathe that low vice, curiosity. But if there's anything in which I shine, 'tis in arranging all my friends' affairs, not having of my own domestic cares. And so I interfered, and with the best intentions. But their treatment was not kind. I think the foolish people were possessed, for neither of them could I ever find, although their porter afterwards confessed, but that's no matter, and the worst's behind, for little Juan o'er me threw downstairs a pail of housemaid's waters, unawares. A little curly-headed, good-for-nothing and mischief-making monkey from his birth. His parents ne'er agreed except in doting upon the most unquiet imp on earth. Instead of quarrelling, had they been but both in their senses, they'd have sent young Master forth to school, or had him soundly whipped at home to teach him manners for the time to come. Don José and the Donna Inez led for some time an unhappy sort of life, wishing each other not divorced, but dead. They lived respectably as man and wife. Their conduct was exceedingly well-bred, and gave no outward sign of inward strife, until at length the smothered fire broke out, and put the business past all kind of doubt, for Inez called some druggists and physicians, and tried to prove her loving lord was mad. But as he had some lucid intermission, she next decided he was only bad. Yet when they asked her for her depositions, no sort of explanation could be had, save that her duty both to man and God required this conduct, which seemed very odd. She kept a journal where his faults were noted, and opened certain trunks of books and letters, all which might, if occasion served, be quoted. And then she had all Seville for abettors, besides her good old grandmother, who doted. The hearers of her case became repeaters, then advocates, inquisitors, and judges, some for amusement, others for old grudges. And then this best and weakest woman bore with such serenity her husband's woes, just as the Spartan ladies did of yore, who saw their spouses killed, and nobly chose never to say a word about them more. Calmly she heard each calumny that rose, and saw his agonies with such sublimity that all the world exclaimed, "What magnanimity!" No doubt this patience when the world is damning us is philosophic in our former friends. 'Tis also pleasant to be deemed magnanimous, and the more so in obtaining our own ends. And what the lawyers call a malus animus, conduct like this by no means comprehends. Revenge in person certainly no virtue, but then 'tis not my fault if others hurt you. And if your quarrels should rip up old stories and help them with a lie or two additional, I'm not to blame. As you well know, no more is anyone else. They were become traditional. Besides, their resurrection aids our glories by contrast, which is just what we were wishing all, and science profits by this resurrection. Dead scandals form good subjects for dissection. Their friends had tried at reconciliation, then their relations, who made matters worse. 'Twere hard to tell upon a like occasion to whom it may be best to have recourse. I can't say much for friend or yet relation. The lawyers did their utmost for divorce, but scarce a fee was paid on either side before, unluckily, Don José died. He died, and most unluckily, because, according to all hints I could collect from counsel learned in those kinds of laws, although their talk's obscure and circumspect, his death contrived to spoil a charming cause. 1,000 pities, also with respect to public feelings, which on this occasion was manifested in a great sensation. But he died, and buried with him lay the public feeling and the lawyer's fees. His house was sold, his servant sent away. A Jew took one of his two mistresses, a priest the other, at least so they say. I asked the doctors after his disease. He died of the slow fever called the tertian, and left his widow to her own aversion. Yet José was an honourable man, that I must say who knew him well. Therefore his frailties I'll no further scan. Indeed, there were not many more to tell, and if his passions now and then outran discretion, and were not so peaceable as Numa's, who was also named Pompilius, he had been ill brought up, and was born bilious. Whate'er might be his worthlessness or worth, poor fellow, he had many things to wound him. Let's own, since it can do no good on earth, it was a trying moment that which found him standing alone beside his desolate hearth, where all his household gods lay shivered round him. No choice was left his feelings or his pride, save death or doctors' commons. So he died. Don Juan by Lord Byron. Canto 1, Part 2, read by Peter Gallagher for LibriVox.org. Dying intestate, Juan was sole heir to a chancery suit, and messages and lands which, with a long minority and care, promised to turn out well in proper hands. Inez became sole guardian, which was fair, and answered but to nature's just demands. An only son, left with an only mother, is brought up much more wisely than another. Sagest of women, even of widows, she resolved that Juan should be quite a paragon, and worthy of the noblest degree. His sire was of Castile, his dam from Aragon. Then, for accomplishments of chivalry, in case our lord the king should go to war again, he learned the arts of riding, fencing, gunnery, and how to scale a fortress, or a nunnery. But that which Donna Inez most desired, and saw into herself each day before all the learned tutors whom for him she hired, was that his breeding should be strictly moral. Much into all his studies she inquired, and so they were submitted first to her, all arts, sciences. No branch was made a mystery to Juan's eyes, excepting natural history. The languages, especially the dead, the sciences, and most of all the abstruse, the arts, at least all such as could be said to be the most remote from common use, in all these he was much and deeply read, but not a page of anything that loose or hints continuation of the species was ever suffered, lest he should grow vicious. His classic studies made a little puzzle, because of filthy loves of gods and goddesses, who in the earlier ages raised a bustle, but never put on pantaloons or bodices. His reverend tutors had at times a tussle, and for their Aeneids, Iliads, and Odysseys were forced to make an odd sort of apology, for Donna Inez dreaded the mythology. Ovid's a rake, as half his verses show him. Anacreon's morals are a still worse sample. Catullus scarcely has a decent poem. I don't think Sappho's Ode a good example, although Longinus tells us there is no hymn where the sublime soars forth on wings more ample. But Virgil's songs are pure, except that horrid one beginning with Formosum pastor Corydon. Lucretius's irreligion is too strong for early stomachs to prove wholesome food. I can't help thinking Juvenal was wrong, although no doubt his real intent was good, for speaking out so plainly in his song, so much indeed as to be downright rude. And then what proper person could be partial to all those nauseous epigrams of Martial? Juan was taught from out the best edition, expurgated by learned men who placed judiciously from out the schoolboy's vision the grosser parts, but fearful to deface too much their modest bard by this omission, and pitying sore his mutilated case, they only add them all in an appendix, which saves, in fact, the trouble of an index. For there we have them all at one fell swoop. Instead of being scattered through the pages, they stand forth marshalled in a handsome troop to meet the ingenious youth of future ages, till some less rigid editor shall stoop to call them back into their separate cages, instead of standing staring all together like garden gods, and not so decent either. The missal, too, it was the family missal, was ornamented in a sort of way which ancient mass books often are, and this all kinds of grotesque illumined. And how they who saw those figures on the margin kiss all could turn their optics to the text and pray is more than I know. But Don Juan's mother kept this herself and gave her son another. Sermons he read, and lectures he endured, and homilies and lives of all the saints. To Jerome and Chrysostom inured, he did not take such studies for restraints. But how faith is acquired and then ensured, so well not one of the aforesaid paints as St. Augustine in his fine Confessions, which makes the reader envy his transgressions. This, too, was a sealed book to little Juan, but I can't but say his mamma was right, if such an education was the true one. She scarcely trusted him from out her sight. Her maids were old, and if she took a new one, you might be sure she was a perfect fright. She did this during even her husband's life. I recommend as much to every wife. Young Juan waxed in goodliness and grace, at 6 a charming child, and at 11 with all the promise of as fine a face as e'er to man's maturer growth was given. He studied steadily and grew apace, and seemed at least in the right road to heaven, for half his days were passed in church, the other between his tutors, confessor, and mother. At 6 I said he was a charming child. At 12 he was a fine but quiet boy, though in infancy a little wild. They tamed him down amongst them to destroy his natural spirit. Not in vain they toiled, at least it seemed so. And his mother's joy was to declare how sage and still and steady her young philosopher was grown already. I had my doubts. Perhaps I have them still, but what I say is neither here nor there. I knew his father well, and have some skill in character, but it would not be fair from sire to son to augur good or ill. He and his wife were an ill-sorted pair, but scandal's my aversion. I protest against all evil speaking, even in jest. For my part, I say nothing. Nothing but this I will say, my reasons are my own, that if I had an only son to put to school, as God be praised that I have none, 'tis not with Donna Inez I would shut him up to learn his catechism alone. No, I'd send him out betimes to college, for there it was I picked up my own knowledge. For there one learns, 'tis not for me to boast, though I acquired, but I pass over that, as well as all the Greek I since have lost. I say there's the place, but verbum sat. I think I picked up too, as well as most, knowledge of matters, but no matter what. I never married, but I think I know that sons should not be educated so. Young Juan now was 16 years of age, tall, handsome, slender, but well knit. He seemed active, though not so sprightly as a page, and everybody but his mother deemed him almost man. But she flew in a rage and bit her lips, for else she might have screamed if any said so, for to be precocious was in her eyes a thing the most atrocious. This recording is in the public domain. Don Juan by Lord Byron, Canto 1, Part 3, read by Peter Gallagher for LibriVox.org. Amongst her numerous acquaintance, all selected for discretion and devotion, there was the Donna Julia, whom to call pretty were but to give a feeble notion of many charms in her as natural as sweetness to the flower, or salt to ocean, her zone to Venus, or his bow to Cupid. But this last simile is trite and stupid. The darkness of her oriental eye accorded with her Moorish origin. Her blood was not all Spanish, by the by. In Spain, you know, this is a sort of sin. When proud Granada fell, and forced to fly Boabdil wept, of Donna Julia's kin some went to Africa, some stayed in Spain. Her great-great-grandmamma chose to remain. She married, I forget the degree, with an hidalgo, who transmitted down his blood less noble than such blood should be. At such alliances his sires would frown, in that point so precise in each degree, that they bred in, and in, as might be shown, marrying their cousins, nay, their aunts and nieces, which always spoils the breed if it increases. This heathenish cross restored the breed again, ruined its blood, but much improved its flesh. For from a root the ugliest in old Spain sprung up a branch as beautiful as fresh. The sons no more were short, the daughters plain. But there's a rumour, which I fain would hush, 'tis said that Donna Julia's grandmamma produced her Don more heirs at love than law. However this might be, the race went on improving still through every generation, until it centred in an only son, who left an only daughter. My narration may have suggested that this single one could be but Julia, whom on this occasion I shall have much to speak about, and she was married, charming, chaste, and 23. Her eye, I'm very fond of handsome eyes, was large and dark, suppressing half its fire until she spoke, and then through its soft disguise flashed an expression more of pride than ire, and love than either. And there would arise a something in them which was not desire, but would have been, perhaps, but for the soul which struggled through and chastened down the whole. Her glossy hair was clustered o'er a brow bright with intelligence, and fair and smooth. Her eyebrows' shape was like the aerial bow, her cheek all purple with the beam of youth mounting at times to a transparent glow, as if her veins ran lightning. She, in sooth, possessed an air and grace by no means common, her stature tall. I hate a dumpy woman. Wedded she was some years, and to a man of 50, and such husbands are in plenty, and yet I think, instead of such a one, 'twere better to have 2 of 5 and 20, especially in countries near the sun. And now I think on't, mi vien in mente, ladies of even the most uneasy virtue prefer a spouse whose age is short of 30. 'Tis a sad thing, I cannot choose to say, and all the fault of that indecent sun, who cannot leave alone our helpless clay, but will keep baking, broiling, burning on, that howsoever people fast and pray, the flesh is frail, and so the soul undone. What men call gallantry, and God's adultery, is much more common where the climate's sultry. Happy the nations of the moral north, where all is virtue, and the winter season sends sin without a rag on, shivering forth. 'Twas snow that brought St. Anthony to reason, where juries cast up what a wife is worth, by laying whate'er sum in mulct they please on the lover, who must pay a handsome price, because it is a marketable vice. Alfonso was the name of Julia's lord, a man well looking for his years, and who was neither much beloved nor yet abhorred. They lived together as most people do, suffering each other's foibles by accord, and not exactly either one or two. Yet he was jealous, though he did not show it, for jealousy dislikes the world to know it. Julia was, yet I could never see why, with Donna Inez quite a favourite friend. Between their tastes there was small sympathy, for not a line had Julia ever penned. Some people whisper, but no doubt they lie, for malice still imputes some private end, that Inez had, ere Don Alfonso's marriage, forgot with him her very prudent carriage, and that, still keeping up the old connection, which time had lately rendered much more chaste, she took his lady also in affection, and certainly this course was much the best. She flattered Julia with her sage protection, and complimented Don Alfonso's taste, and if she could not, who can, silence scandal, at least she left it a more slender handle. I can't tell whether Julia saw the affair with other people's eyes, or if her own discoveries made, but none could be aware of this, at least no symptom e'er was shown. Perhaps she did not know, or did not care. Indifferent from the first, or callous grown, I'm really puzzled what to think or say, she kept her counsel in so close a way. Juan she saw, and as a pretty child caressed him often. Such a thing might be quite innocently done, and harmless styled when she had 20 years, and 13 he. But I am not so sure I should have smiled when he was 16, Julia 23. These few short years make wondrous alterations, particularly among the sunburnt nations. Whatever the cause might be, they had become changed, for the dame grew distant, the youth shy, their looks cast down, their greetings almost dumb, and much embarrassment in either eye. There surely will be little doubt with some that Donna Julia knew the reason why, but as for Juan, he had no more notion than he who never saw the sea of ocean. Yet Julia's very coldness still was kind, and tremulously gentle her small hand withdrew itself from his, but left behind a little pressure, thrilling, and so bland and slight, so very slight, that to the mind 'twas but a doubt. But ne'er magician's wand wrought change with all Armida's fairy art, like what this light touch left on Juan's heart. And if she met him, though she smiled no more, she looked a sadness sweeter than her smile, as if her heart had deeper thoughts in store she must not own, but cherished more the while for that compression in its burning core. Even innocence itself has many a wile, and will not dare to trust itself with truth, and love is taught hypocrisy from youth. But passion most dissembles, yet betrays even by its darkness. As the blackest sky foretells the heaviest tempest, it displays its workings through the vainly guarded eye, and in whatever aspect it arrays itself, 'tis still the same hypocrisy. coldness or anger, even disdain or hate, are masks it often wears, and still too late. Then there were sighs, the deeper for suppression, and stolen glances, sweeter for the theft, and burning blushes, though for no transgression, tremblings when met, and restlessness when left. All these are little preludes to possession of which young passion cannot be bereft, and merely tend to show how greatly love is embarrassed at first starting with a novice. Poor Julia's heart was in an awkward state. She felt it going, and resolved to make the noblest efforts for herself and mate, for honours, prides, religions, virtue's sake. Her resolutions were most truly great, and almost might have made a Tarquin quake. She prayed the Virgin Mary for her grace, as being the best judge of a lady's case. She vowed she never would see Juan more, and next day paid a visit to his mother, and looked extremely at the opening door, which, by the Virgin's grace, let in another. Grateful she was, and yet a little sore. Again it opens, it can be no other, 'tis surely Juan now. No, I'm afraid that night the Virgin was no further prayed. She now determined that a virtuous woman should rather face and overcome temptation, that flight was base and dastardly, and no man should ever give her heart the least sensation. That is to say, a thought beyond the common preference that we must feel upon occasion for people who are pleasanter than others. But then they only seem so many brothers, and even if by chance, and who can tell, the devil so very sly, she should discover that all within was not so very well, and, if still free, that such or such a lover might please, perhaps a virtuous wife can quell such thoughts, and be the better when they're over. And if the man should ask, 'tis but denial. I recommend young ladies to make trial. And then there are such things as love divine, bright and immaculate, unmixed and pure, such as the angels think so very fine, and matrons who would be no less secure, platonic, perfect, just such love as mine. Thus Julia said, and thought so, to be sure. And so I'd have her think, were I the man on whom her reveries celestial ran. Such love is innocent, and may exist between young persons without any danger. A hand may first, and then a lip be kissed. For my part, to such doings I'm a stranger, but here these freedoms form the utmost list of all o'er which such love may be a ranger. If people go beyond, 'tis quite a crime, but not my fault. I tell them all in time. Love, then, but love within its proper limits, was Julia's innocent determination in young Don Juan's favour, and to him its exertion might be useful on occasion. And, lighted at too pure a shrine to dim its ethereal lustre, with what sweet persuasions he might be taught by love and her together, I really don't know what. Nor Julia either. Fraught with this fine intention, and well fenced in mail of proof, her purity of soul, she for the future of her strength convinced, and that her honour was a rock or mole, exceeding sagely from that hour dispensed with any kind of troublesome control. But whether Julia to the task was equal, is that which must be mentioned in the sequel. Her plan she deemed both innocent and feasible, and surely with a stripling of 16, not scandal's fangs could fix on much that's seizable, or if they did so, satisfied to mean nothing but what was good. Her breast was peaceable. A quiet conscience makes one so serene. Christians have burnt each other, quite persuaded that all the apostles would have done as they did. And if in the meantime her husband died, but heaven forbid that such a thought should cross her brain, though in a dream, and then she sighed, never could she survive that common loss. But just suppose that moment should betide, I only say suppose it, into nos. This should be entre nous, for Julia thought in French, but then the rhyme would go for naught. I only say suppose this supposition. Juan, being then grown up to man's estate, would fully suit a widow of condition. Even 7 years hence it would not be too late. And in the interim, to pursue this vision, the mischief after all could not be great, for he would learn the rudiments of love, I mean the seraph ways of those above.
This recording is in the public domain. Don Juan by Lord Byron, Canto 1, Part 4, read by Peter Gallagher for LibriVox.org.
So much for Julia. Now we'll turn to Juan, poor little fellow. He had no idea of his own case and never hit the true one. In feelings quick as Ovid's Miss Medea, he puzzled over what he found a new one, but not as yet imagined it could be thing quite in course, and not at all alarming, which with a little patience might grow charming. Silent and pensive, idle, restless, slow, his home deserted for the lonely wood, tormented with a wound he could not know, his, like all deep grief, plunged in solitude. I'm fond myself of solitude or so, but then I beg it may be understood by solitude I mean a sultan's, not a hermit's, with a harem for a grot. O love, in such a wilderness as this, where transport and security entwine, here is the empire of thy perfect bliss, and here thou art a god indeed divine. The bard I quote from does not sing amiss, with the exception of the second line, for that same twining transport and security are twisted to a phrase of some obscurity. The poet meant, no doubt, and thus appeals to the good sense and senses of mankind, the very thing which everybody feels, as all have found on trial or may find, that no one likes to be disturbed at meals or love. I won't say more about entwined or transport, as we knew all that before, but beg security will bolt the door. Young Juan wandered by the glassy brooks, thinking unutterable things. He threw himself at length within the leafy nooks where the wild branch of the cork forest grew. There poets find material for their books, and every now and then we read them through, so that their plan and prosody are eligible, unless, like Wordsworth, they prove unintelligible. He, Juan, and not Wordsworth, so pursued his self-communion with his own high soul, until his mighty heart in its great mood had mitigated part, though not the whole, of its disease. He did the best he could with things not very subject to control, and turned without perceiving his condition like Coleridge into a metaphysician. He thought about himself and the whole earth, of man the wonderful, and of the stars, and how the deuce they ever could have birth, and then he thought of earthquakes, and of wars, how many miles the moon might have in girth, of air balloons, and of the many bars to perfect knowledge of the boundless skies, and then he thought of Donna Julia's eyes. In thoughts like these, true wisdom may discern longings sublime, and aspirations high, which some are born with, but the most part learn to plague themselves withal, they know not why. 'Twas strange that one so young should thus concern his brain about the action of the sky. If you think 'twas philosophy that this did, I can't help thinking puberty assisted. He pored upon the leaves and on the flowers, and heard a voice in all the winds, and then he thought of wood-nymphs and immortal bowers, and how the goddesses came down to men. He missed the pathway, he forgot the hours, and when he looked upon his watch again, he found how much old time had been a winner. He also found that he had lost his dinner. Sometimes he turned to gaze upon his book, Boscan or Garcilaso. By the wind, even as the pages rustled while we look, so by the poesy of his own mind over the mystic leaf his soul was shook, as if 'twere one whereon magicians bind their spells, and give them to the passing gale, according to some good old woman's tale. Thus would he while his lonely hours away, dissatisfied, nor knowing what he wanted, nor glowing reverie, nor poet's lay could yield his spirit that for which it panted, a bosom whereon he his head might lay, and hear the heart beat with the love it granted, with several other things which I forget, or which at least I need not mention yet. Those lonely walks and lengthening reveries could not escape the gentle Julia's eyes. She saw that Juan was not at his ease, but that which chiefly may and must surprise is that Donna Inez did not tease her only son with question or surmise. Whether it was she did not see, or would not, or, like all very clever people, could not. This may seem strange, but yet 'tis very common. For instance, gentlemen whose ladies take leave to o'erstep the written rights of woman, and break the... Which commandment is they break? I have forgot the number, and I think no man should rashly quote, for fear of a mistake. I say, when these same gentlemen are jealous, they make some blunder, which their ladies tell us. A real husband always is suspicious, but still no less suspects in the wrong place. Jealous of someone who had no such wishes, or pandering blindly to his own disgrace by harbouring some dear friend extremely vicious. This last indeed's infallibly the case, and when the spouse and friend are gone off wholly, he wonders at their vice, and not his folly. Thus parents also are at times short-sighted. Though watchful as the lynx, they ne'er discover the while the wicked world beholds delighted young hopeful's mistress, or Miss Fanny's lover, till some confounded escapade has blighted the plan of 20 years, and all is over. And then the mother cries, the father swears, and wonders why the devil he got heirs. But Inez was so anxious and so clear of sight that I must think, on this occasion, she had some other motive, much more near, for leaving Juan to this new temptation. But what that motive was, I shan't say here. Perhaps to finish Juan's education, perhaps to open Don Alfonso's eyes, in case he thought his wife too great a prize. It was upon a day, a summer's day. Summer's indeed a very dangerous season, and so is spring about the end of May. The sun, no doubt, is the prevailing reason. But whatsoe'er the cause is, one may say, and stand convicted more of truth than treason, that there are months which nature grows more merry in. March has its hares, and May must have its heroine. 'Twas on a summer's day, the 6th of June. I like to be particular in dates, not only of the age and year, but moon. They are a sort of post-house, where the fates change horses, making history change its tune, then spur away o'er empires and o'er states, leaving at last not much beside chronology, excepting the post-obits of theology. 'Twas on the 6th of June, about the hour of 6:30, perhaps still nearer 7, when Julia sat within as pretty a bower as e'er held hoary in that heathenish heaven described by Mahomet, and Anacreon Moore, to whom the lyre and laurels have been given with all the trophies of triumphant song. He won them well, and may he wear them long. She sat, but not alone. I know not well how this same interview had taken place, and even if I knew, I should not tell. People should hold their tongues in any case. No matter how or why the thing befell, but there was she and Juan, face to face. When two such faces are so, 'twould be wise, but very difficult, to shut their eyes. How beautiful she looked! Her conscious heart glowed in her cheek, and yet she felt no wrong. O love, how perfect is thy mystic art, strengthening the weak and trampling on the strong! How self-deceitful is the sagest part of mortals, whom thy lure hath led along! The precipice she stood on was immense. So was her creed in her own innocence. She thought of her own strength, and Juan's youth, and of the folly of all prudish fears, Victoria's virtue and domestic truth, and then of Don Alfonso's 50 years. I wish these last had not occurred in sooth, because that number rarely much endears, and through all climes, the snowy and the sunny, sounds ill in love, whate'er it may in money. When people say, "I've told you 50 times," they mean to scold, and very often do. When poets say, "I've written 50 rhymes," they make you dread that they'll recite them too. In gangs of 50, thieves commit their crimes. At 50, love for love is rare, 'tis true. But then, no doubt, it equally as true is, a good deal may be bought for 50 louis. Julia had honour, virtue, truth, and love for Don Alfonso. And she inly swore, by all the vows below, to powers above, she never would disgrace the ring she wore, nor leave a wish which wisdom might reprove. And while she pondered this, besides much more, one hand on Juan's carelessly was thrown, quite by mistake. She thought it was her own. Unconsciously she leaned upon the other, which played within the tangles of her hair. And to contend with thoughts she could not smother, she seemed, by the distraction of her air. 'Twas surely very wrong of Juan's mother to leave together this imprudent pair, she who for many years had watched her son so. I'm very certain mine would not have done so. The hand which still held Juan's by degrees gently but palpably confirmed its grasp, as if it said, "Detain me, if you please." Yet there's no doubt she only meant to clasp his fingers with a pure platonic squeeze. She would have shrunk as from a toad or asp, had she imagined such a thing could rouse a feeling dangerous to a prudent spouse. I cannot know what Juan thought of this, but what he did is much what you would do. His young lip thanked it with a grateful kiss, and then, abashed at its own joy, withdrew in deep despair, lest he had done amiss. Love is so very timid when 'tis new. She blushed and frowned not, but she strove to speak, and held her tongue. Her voice was grown so weak. The sun set, and uprose the yellow moon. The devil's in the moon for mischief. They who called her chaste, methinks, began too soon their nomenclature. There is not a day, the longest, not the 21st of June, sees half the business in a wicked way, on which 3 single hours of moonshine smile. And then she looks so modest all the while. There is a dangerous silence in that hour, a stillness which leaves room for the full soul to open all itself, without the power of calling wholly back its self-control. The silver light, which hallowing tree and tower sheds beauty and deep softness o'er the whole, breathes also to the heart, and o'er it throws a loving languor, which is not repose. And Julia sat with Juan, half embraced and half retiring from the glowing arm, which trembled like the bosom where 'twas placed. Yet still she must have thought there was no harm, or else 'twere easy to withdraw her waist. But then the situation had its charm, and then God knows what next. I can't go on. I'm almost sorry that I e'er begun. Oh, Plato, Plato, you have paved the way with your confounded fantasies to more immoral conduct by the fancied sway your system feigns o'er the controlless core of human hearts than all the long array of poets and romancers. You're a bore, a charlatan, a coxcomb, and have been, at best, no better than a go-between. And Julia's voice was lost except in sighs, until too late for useful conversation. The tears were gushing from her gentle eyes. I wish indeed they had not had occasion, but who, alas, can love and then be wise? Not that remorse did not oppose temptation. A little while she strove, and much repented, and whispering, I will ne'er consent, consented.
This recording is in the public domain. Don Juan by Lord Byron, Canto 1, Part 5, read by Peter Gallagher for LibriVox.org.
'Tis said that Xerxes offered a reward to those who could invent him a new pleasure. Methinks the requisition's rather hard, and must have cost his majesty a treasure. For my part, I'm a moderate-minded bard, fond of a little love, which I call leisure. I care not for new pleasures, as the old are quite enough for me, so they but hold. Oh, pleasure, you're a pleasant thing, although one must be damned for you, no doubt. I make a resolution every spring of reformation, ere the year run out, but somehow this my vestal vow takes wing. Yet still I trust it may be kept throughout. I'm very sorry, very much ashamed, and mean next winter to be quite reclaimed. Here my chaste muse a liberty must take. Start not, still chaster reader, she'll be nice hence. Forward, and there's no great cause to quake. This liberty is a poetic licence, which some irregularity may make in the design, and as I have a high sense of Aristotle and the rules, 'tis fit to beg his pardon when I err a bit. This licence is to hope the reader will suppose from June the 6th, the fatal day without whose epoch my poetic skill for want of facts would all be thrown away, but keeping Julia and Don Juan still in sight, that several months have passed. We'll say 'twas in November, but I'm not so sure about the day, the era's more obscure. We'll talk of that anon. 'Tis sweet to hear at midnight on the blue and moonlit deep the song and oar of Adria's gondolier by distance mellowed o'er the water's sweep. 'Tis sweet to see the evening star appear, 'tis sweet to listen as the night winds creep from leaf to leaf. 'Tis sweet to view on high the rainbow based on ocean span the sky. 'Tis sweet to hear the watchdog's honest bark bay deep-mouthed welcome as we draw near home. 'Tis sweet to know there is an eye will mark our coming, and look brighter when we come. 'Tis sweet to be awakened by the lark, or lulled by falling waters. Sweet the hum of bees, the voice of girls, the song of birds, the lisp of children, and their earliest words. Sweet is the vintage when the showering grapes in bacchanal profusion reel to earth, purple and gushing. Sweet are our escapes from civic revelry to rural mirth. Sweet to the miser are his glittering heaps, sweet to the father is his firstborn's birth. Sweet is revenge, especially to women, pillage to soldiers, prize money to seamen. Sweet is a legacy, and passing sweet, the unexpected death of some old lady or gentleman of 70 years complete, who've made us youth wait too long already for an estate, or cash, or country seat, still breaking, but with stamina so steady that all the Israelites are fit to mob its next owner for their double-damned post-obits. 'Tis sweet to win, no matter how, one's laurels by blood or ink. 'Tis sweet to put an end to strife. 'Tis sometimes sweet to have our quarrels, particularly with a tiresome friend. Sweet is old wine in bottles, ale in barrels. Dear is the helpless creature we defend against the world, and dear the schoolboy's spot we ne'er forget, though there we are forgot. But sweeter still than this, than these, than all, is first and passionate love. It stands alone like Adam's recollection of his fall. The tree of knowledge has been plucked, all's known, and life yields nothing further to recall worthy of this ambrosial sin, so shown no doubt in fable as the unforgiven fire which Prometheus filched for us from heaven. Man's a strange animal, and makes strange use of his own nature and the various arts, and likes particularly to produce some new experiment to show his parts. This is the age of oddities let loose, where different talents find their different marts. You'd best begin with truth, and when you've lost your labour, there's a sure market for imposture. What opposite discoveries we have seen, signs of true genius and of empty pockets. One makes new noses, one a guillotine, one breaks your bones, one sets them in their sockets. But vaccination certainly has been a kind antithesis to Congreve's rockets, with which the doctor paid off an old pox by borrowing a new one from an ox. Bread has been made, indifferent, from potatoes, and galvanism has set some corpses grinning, but has not answered like the apparatus of the humane societies, beginning by which men are unsuffocated gratis. What wondrous new machines have late been spinning! I said the smallpox has gone out of late. Perhaps it may be followed by the great. 'Tis said the great came from America. Perhaps it may set out on its return. The population there so spreads, they say, 'tis grown high time to thin it in its turn with war, or plague, or famine anyway, so that civilization they may learn, and which in ravage the more loathsome evil is, their real lues or our pseudo-syphilis. This is the patent age of new inventions for killing bodies and for saving souls, all propagated with the best intentions. Sir Humphrey Davy's lantern, by which coals are safely mined for in the mode he mentions. Tombuctoo travels, voyages to the poles, are ways to benefit mankind as true, perhaps, as shooting them at Waterloo. Man's a phenomenon, one knows not what, and wonderful beyond all wondrous measure. 'Tis pity, though, in this sublime world, that pleasure's a sin, and sometimes sin's a pleasure. Few mortals know what end they would be at, but whether glory, power, or love, or treasure, the path is through perplexing ways, and when the goal is gained, we die, you know. And then, what then? I do not know, no more do you, and so good night. Return we to our story. 'Twas in November, when fine days are few, and the far mountains wax a little hoary, and clap a white cape on their mantles blue, and the sea dashes round the promontory, and the loud breaker boils against the rock, and sober suns must set at 5 o'clock. 'Twas, as the watchmen say, a cloudy night, no moon, no stars, the wind was low or loud by gusts, and many a sparkling hearth was bright with piled wood, round which the family crowd. There's something cheerful in that sort of light, even as a summer sky without a cloud. I'm fond of fire and crickets and all that, a lobster salad and champagne and chat. 'Twas midnight. Donna Julia was in bed, sleeping, most probably, when at her door arose a clatter might awake the dead, if they had never been awoke before, and that they have been so we all have read, and are to be so, at the least, once more. The door was fastened, but with voice and fist first knocks were heard, then, "Madam, madam, hist! For God's sake, madam, madam, here's my master, with more than half the city at his back. Was ever heard of such a cursed disaster? 'Tis not my fault, I kept a good watch. Alack, do pray undo the bolt a little faster. They're on the stair just now, and in a crack will all be here. Perhaps he yet may fly. Surely the window's not so very high." By this time Don Alfonso was arrived, with torches, friends, and servants in great number. The major part of them had long been wived, and therefore paused not to disturb the slumber of any wicked woman who contrived by stealth her husband's temples to encumber. Examples of this kind are so contagious, were one not punished, all would be outrageous. I can't tell how, or why, or what suspicion could enter into Don Alfonso's head, but for a cavalier of his condition it surely was exceedingly ill-bred, without a word of previous admonition, to hold a levee round his lady's bed, and summon lackeys, armed with fire and sword, to prove himself the thing he most abhorred. Poor Donna Julia, starting as from sleep, mind that I do not say she had not slept, began at once to scream and yawn and weep. Her maid Antonia, who was an adept, contrived to fling the bedclothes in a heap, as if she had just now from out them crept. I can't tell why she should take all this trouble to prove her mistress had been sleeping double. But Julia mistress and Antonia maid appeared like two poor harmless women, who, of goblins but still more of men afraid, had thought one man might be deterred by two, and therefore side by side were gently laid, until the hours of absence should run through, and truant husband should return and say, "My dear, I was the first who came away." Now Julia found at length a voice, and cried, "In heaven's name, Don Alfonso, what do you mean? Has madness seized you? Would that I had died ere such a monster's victim I have been! What may this midnight violence betide? A sudden fit of drunkenness, or spleen? Dare you suspect me, whom the thought would kill? Search then the room." Alfonso said, "I will." He searched, they searched, and rummaged everywhere, clothes and closet press, chest and window seat, and found much linen, lace, and several pair of stockings, slippers, brushes, combs, complete with other articles of ladies' fare, to keep them beautiful or leave them neat. Arras they pricked, and curtains with their swords, and wounded several shutters, and some boards. Under the bed they searched, and there they found no matter what, it was not that they sought. They opened windows, gazing if the ground had signs or footmarks, but the earth said naught, and then they stared each other's faces round. 'Tis odd, not one of all those seekers thought, and seems to me almost a sort of blunder, of looking in the bed as well as under. During this inquisition, Julia's tongue was not asleep. "Yes, search and search," she cried, "insult on insult heap, and wrong on wrong. It was for this that I became a bride. For this in silence I have suffered long, a husband like Alfonso at my side. But now I'll bear no more, nor here remain, if there be law or lawyers in all Spain. Yes, Don Alfonso, husband now no more, if ever you indeed deserve the name. Is't worthy of your years? You have 60, 50 or 60, it is all the same. Is't wise or fitting, causeless to explore for facts against a virtuous woman's fame? Ungrateful, perjured, barbarous Don Alfonso, how dare you think your lady would go on so? Is't for this I have disdained to hold the common privileges of my sex? That I have chosen a confessor so old and deaf that any other it would vex, and never once has he had cause to scold, but found my very innocence perplexed so much, he always doubted I was married. How sorry you will be when I've miscarried! Was't for this that no cortejo e'er I yet have chosen from out the youth of all Seville? Is't for this I scarce went anywhere, except to bullfights, mass, play, rout, and revel? Is't for this, where'er my suitors were, I favoured none, nay, was most uncivil? Is't for this that General Count O'Reilly, who took Algiers, declares I used him vilely? Did not the Italian musicer Casani sing at my heart 6 months at least in vain? Did not his countryman Count Corniani call me the only virtuous wife in Spain? Were there not also Russians, English many? The Count Stroganoff I put in pain, and Lord Mount Coffeehouse, the Irish peer, who killed himself for love with wine last year. Have I not had 2 bishops at my feet, the Duke of Icar and Don Fernand Nunez? And is it thus a faithful wife you treat? I wonder in what quarter now the moon is. I praise your vast forbearance not to beat me also, since the time so opportune is. O valiant man, with sword drawn and cocked trigger, now tell me, don't you cut a pretty figure? Was it for this you took your sudden journey under pretence of business indispensable with that sublime of rascals, your attorney, whom I see standing there and looking sensible of having played the fool? Though both I spurn, he deserves the worst. His conduct's less defensible, because no doubt 'twas for his dirty fee, and not from heavy love to you or me. If he comes here to take a deposition, by all means let the gentleman proceed. You've made the apartment in a fit condition. There's pen and ink for you, sir, when you need. Let everything be noted with precision. I would not you for nothing should be feed. But as my maid's undressed, pray turn your spies out. Oh, sobbed Antonia, I could tear their eyes out. There is the closet, there the toilet, there the antechamber, search them under, over. There's the sofa, there's the great armchair, the chimney, which would really hold a lover. I wish to sleep, and beg you will take care and make no further noise till you discover the secret cavern of this lurking treasure, and when 'tis found, let me too have that pleasure. And now, Hidalgo, now that you have thrown doubt upon me, confusion over all, pray have the courtesy to make it known who is the man you search for. How do you call him? What's his lineage? Let him be but shown, I hope, he's young and handsome. Is he tall? Tell me, and be assured that since you stain my honour thus, it shall not be in vain. At least, perhaps, he has not 60 years. At that age he would be too old for slaughter or for so young a husband's jealous fears. Antonia, let me have a glass of water. I am ashamed of having shed these tears. They are unworthy of my father's daughter. My mother dreamed not in my natal hour that I should fall into a monster's power. Perhaps 'tis of Antonia you are jealous. You saw that she was sleeping by my side when you broke in upon us with your fellows. Look where you please, we've nothing, sir, to hide. Only another time I trust you'll tell us, or for the sake of decency abide a moment at the door, that we may be dressed to receive so much good company. And now, sir, I have done, and say no more. The little I have said may serve to show the guileless heart in silence may grieve all the wrongs to whose exposure it is slow. I leave you to your conscience as before. which will one day ask you why you use me so. God grant you feel not then the bitterest grief. Antonia, where's my pocket handkerchief?
This recording is in the public domain. Don Juan by Lord Byron, Canto 1, Part 6, read by Peter Gallagher for LibriVox.org.
She ceased and turned upon her pillow. Pale she lay, her dark eyes flashing through their tears like skies that rain and lighten. As a veil waved and o'ershading her wan cheek appears her streaming hair, the black curls strive but fail to hide the glossy shoulder, which uprears its snow through all. Her soft lips lie apart, and louder than her breathing beats her heart. The Signor Don Alfonso stood confused. Antonia bustled round the ransacked room, and turning up her nose with looks abused her master and his myrmidons, of whom not one, except the attorney, was amused. He, like Achates, faithful to the tomb, so there were quarrels, cared not for the cause, knowing they must be settled by the laws. With prying snub-nose and small eyes he stood following Antonia's motions here and there, with much suspicion in his attitude. For reputations he had little care, so that a suit or action were made good. Small pity had he for the young and fair, and ne'er believed in negatives, till these were proved by competent false witnesses. But Don Alfonso stood with downcast looks, and, truth to say, he made a foolish figure, when, after searching in 500 nooks and treating a young wife with so much rigour, he'd gained no point, except some self-rebukes added to those his lady with such vigour had poured upon him for the last half-hour, quick, thick, and heavy as a thunder-shower. At first he tried to hammer an excuse, to which the sole reply was tears and sobs, and indications of hysterics, whose prologue is always certain throes and throbs, gasps, and whatever else the owners choose. Alfonso saw his wife and thought of Job's. He saw, too, in perspective, her relations, and then he tried to muster all his patience. He stood in act to speak, or rather stammer, but sage Antonia cut him short before the anvil of his speech received the hammer, with, "Pray, sir, leave the room, and say no more, or madam dies." Alfonso muttered, "Damn her," but nothing else. The time of words was o'er. He cast a rueful look or two, and did, he knew not wherefore, that which he was bid. With him retired his posse comitatus, the attorney last, who lingered near the door reluctantly, still tarrying there as late as Antonia let him, not a little sore at this most strange and unexplained hiatus in Don Alfonso's facts, which just now wore an awkward look. As he revolved the case, the door was fastened in his legal face. No sooner was it bolted than, oh shame, oh sin, oh sorrow, and oh womankind, how can you do such things and keep your fame unless this world and t'other too be blind? Nothing so dear as an unfilched good name. But to proceed, for there is more behind, with much heartfelt reluctance, be it said, young Juan slipped, half smothered, from the bed. He had been hid. I don't pretend to say how, nor can I indeed describe the where. Young, slender, and packed easily, he lay no doubt in little compass, round or square, but pity him, I neither must nor may his suffocation by that pretty pair. 'Twere better sure to die so than be shut with Magdalen Clarence in his malmsey butt. And secondly, I pity not because he had no business to commit a sin forbid by heavenly, fined by human laws. At least 'twas rather early to begin, but at 16 the conscience rarely gnaws so much as when we call our old debts in at 60 years, and draw the accounts of evil, and find a deuced balance with the devil. Of his position I can give no notion. 'Tis written in the Hebrew Chronicle how the physicians, leaving pill and potion, prescribed by way of blister a young bell when old King David's blood grew dull in motion, and that the medicine answered very well. Perhaps 'twas in a different way applied, for David lived, but Juan nearly died. What's to be done? Alfonso will be back the moment he has sent his fools away. Antonia's skill was put upon the rack, but no device could be brought into play. And how to parry the renewed attack? Besides, it wanted but few hours of day. Antonia puzzled. Julia did not speak, but pressed her bloodless lip to Juan's cheek. He turned his lip to hers, and with his hand called back the tangles of her wandering hair. Even then their love they could not all command, and half forgot their danger and despair. Antonia's patience now was at a stand. "Come, come, 'tis no time now for fooling there," she whispered in great wrath. "I must deposit this pretty gentleman within the closet. Pray keep your nonsense for some luckier night. Who can have put my master in this mood? What will become on't? I'm in such a fright. The devil's in the urchin, and no good. Is this a time for giggling? This a plight? Why, don't you know that it may end in blood? You'll lose your life, and I shall lose my place, my mistress all, for that half-girlish face. Had it but been for a stout cavalier of 25 or 30, come, make haste. But for a child, what a piece of work is here! I really, madam, wonder at your taste. Come, sir, get in. My master must be near. There for the present, at the least, he's fast, and if we can but till the morning keep our counsel, Juan, mind you must not sleep." Now Don Alfonso entering, but alone, closed the oration of the trusty maid. She loitered, and he told her to be gone. An order somewhat sullenly obeyed. However, present remedy was none, and no great good seemed answered if she stayed. Regarding both with slow and sidelong view, she snuffed the candle, curtsied, and withdrew. Alfonso paused a minute, then begun some strange excuses for his late proceeding. He would not justify what he had done, to say the best. It was extreme ill-breeding, but there were ample reasons for it, none of which he specified in this his pleading. His speech was a fine sample, on the whole, of rhetoric, which the learned call rigmarole. Julia said naught, though all the while there rose a ready answer, which at once enables a matron who her husband's foible knows by a few timely words to turn the tables, which if it does not silence, still must pose, even if it should comprise a pack of fables. 'Tis to retort with firmness, and when he suspects with one, do you reproach with three. Julia, in fact, had tolerable grounds. Alfonso's loves with Inez were well known, but whether 'twas that one's own guilt confounds, but that can't be, as has been often shown, a lady with apologies abounds. It might be that her silence sprang alone from delicacy to Don Juan's ear, to whom she knew his mother's fame was dear. There might be one more motive, which makes two. Alfonso ne'er to Juan had alluded, mentioned his jealousy, but never who had been a happy lover he concluded concealed among his premises. 'Tis true, his mind the more o'er this its mystery brooded. To speak of Inez now were, one may say, like throwing Juan in Alfonso's way. A hint in tender cases is enough. Silence is best. Besides, there is a tact. That modern phrase appears to me sad stuff, but it will serve to keep my verse compact, which keeps, when pushed by questions rather rough, a lady always distant from the fact. The charming creatures lie with such a grace. There's nothing so becoming to the face. They blush, and we believe them. At least, I have always done so. 'Tis of no great use in any case attempting a reply, for then their eloquence grows quite profuse, and when at length they're out of breath, they sigh, and cast their languid eyes down, and let loose a tear or two, and then we make it up, and then sit down and sup. Alfonso closed his speech, and begged her pardon, which Julia half withheld, and then half granted, and laid conditions he thought very hard on, denying several little things he wanted. He stood like Adam, lingering near his garden, with useless penitence perplexed and haunted, beseeching she no further would refuse, when, lo, he stumbled o'er a pair of shoes. A pair of shoes? What then? Not much, if they are such as fit with ladies' feet, but these, no one can tell how much I grieve to say, were masculine. To see them and to seize was but a moment's act, Ah, well-a-day, my teeth begin to chatter, my veins freeze. Alfonso first examined well their fashion, then flew out into another passion. He left the room for his relinquished sword, and Julia instant to the closet flew. Fly, Juan, fly, for heaven's sake! Not a word, the door is open. You may yet slip through the passage you so often have explored. Here is the garden key. Fly, fly, adieu, haste, haste, I hear Alfonso's hurrying feet. Day has not broke, there's no one in the street. None can say this was not good advice. The only mischief was, it came too late. Of all experience 'tis the usual price, a sort of income tax laid on by fate. Juan had reached the room door in a trice, and might have done so by the garden gate, but met Alfonso in his dressing gown, who threatened death, so Juan knocked him down. Dire was the scuffle, and out went the light. Antonia cried out, "Rape!" and Julia, "Fire!" but not a servant stirred to aid the fight. Alfonso, pommelled to his heart's desire, swore lustily he'd be revenged this night, and Juan, too, blasphemed an octave higher. His blood was up. Though young, he was a Tartar, and not at all disposed to prove a martyr. Alfonso's sword had dropped ere he could draw it, and they continued battling hand to hand, for Juan, very luckily, ne'er saw it, his temper not being under great command. If at that moment he had chanced to claw it, Alfonso's days had not been in the land much longer. Think of husbands, lovers' lives, and how you may be doubly widows' wives. Alfonso grappled to detain the foe, and Juan throttled him to get away. The blood, 'twas from the nose, began to flow. At last, as they more faintly wrestling lay, Juan contrived to give an awkward blow, and then his only garment quite gave way. He fled like Joseph, leaving it, but there, I doubt, all likeness ends between the pair. Lights came at length, and men and maids, who found an awkward spectacle their eyes before. Antonia in hysterics, Julia swooned, Alfonso leaning breathless by the door, some half-torn drapery scattered on the ground, some blood, and several footsteps, but no more. Juan, the gate gained, turned the key about, and, liking not the inside, locked the out.
This recording is in the public domain. Don Juan by Lord Byron, Canto 1, Part 7, read by Peter Gallagher for LibriVox.org.
Here ends this canto. Need I sing or say how Juan, favoured by the night who favours what she should not, found his way and reached his home in an unseemly plight? The pleasant scandal which arose next day, the 9 days' wonder which was brought to light, and how Alfonso sued for a divorce, were in the English newspapers, of course. If you would like to see the whole proceedings, the depositions and the cause at full, the names of all the witnesses, the pleadings of counsel to non-suit or to annul, there's more than one edition, and the readings are various, but they none of them are dull. The best is that in shorthand ta'en by Gurney, who to Madrid on purpose made a journey. But Donna Inez, to divert the train of one of the most circulating scandals that had for centuries been known in Spain, at least since the retirement of the Vandals, first vowed, and never had she vowed in vain, to Virgin Mary several pounds of candles, and then, by the advice of some old ladies, she sent her son to be shipped off from Cadiz. She had resolved that he should travel through all European climes, by land or sea, to mend his former morals, and get new, especially in France and Italy. At least, this is the thing most people do. Julia was sent into a convent. She grieved, but perhaps her feelings may be better shown in the following copy of her letter. They tell me 'tis decided, you depart. 'Tis wise, 'tis well, but not the less a pain. I have no further claim on your young heart. Mine is the victim, and would be again. To love too much has been the only art I used. I write in haste, and if a stain be on this sheet, 'tis not what it appears. My eyeballs burn and throb, but have no tears. I loved, I love you. For this love have lost state, station, heaven, mankind's, my own esteem, and yet cannot regret what it hath cost, so dear is still the memory of that dream. Yet if I name my guilt, 'tis not to boast, None can deem harshlier of me than I deem. I trace this scrawl because I cannot rest. I've nothing to reproach or to request. Man's love is of man's life a thing apart. 'Tis woman's whole existence. Man may range the court, camp, church, the vessel and the mart, sword, gown, gain, glory offer in exchange, pride, fame, ambition to fill up his heart, and few there are whom these cannot estrange. Men have all these resources, we but one, to love again and be again undone. You will proceed in pleasure and in pride, beloved and loving many. All is o'er for me on earth, except some years to hide my shame and sorrow deep in my heart's core. These I could bear, but cannot cast aside the passion which still rages as before, and so farewell. Forgive me, love me. No, that word is idle now, but let it go. My breast has been all weakness, is so yet, but still I think I can collect my mind. My blood still rushes where my spirit's set, as roll the waves before the settled wind. My heart is feminine, nor can forget, to all except one image madly blind. So shakes the needle, and so stands the pole, as vibrates my fond heart to my fixed soul. I have no more to say, but linger still, and dare not set my seal upon this sheet, and yet I may as well the task fulfil. My misery can scarce be more complete. I had not lived till now, could sorrow kill. Death shuns the wretch who fain the blow would meet, and I must even survive this last adieu, and bear with life to love and pray for you. This note was written upon gilt-edged paper with a neat little crow-quill, slight and new. Her small white hand could hardly reach the taper, it trembled as magnetic needles do, and yet she did not let one tear escape her. The seal, a sunflower, Elle vous suit partout. The motto cut upon a white cornelian. The wax was superfine, its hue vermilion. This was Don Juan's earliest scrape, but whether I shall proceed with his adventures is dependent on the public altogether. We'll see, however, what they say to this. Their favour in an author's cap's a feather, and no great mischief's done by their caprice, and if their approbation we experience, perhaps they'll have some more about a year hence. My poem's epic, and is meant to be divided in 12 books, each book containing, with love and war, a heavy gale at sea, a list of ships and captains and kings reigning, new characters. The episodes are 3, a panoramic view of hell's in training after the style of Virgil and of Homer, so that my name of epic's no misnomer. All these things will be specified in time, with strict regard to Aristotle's rules, the vade mecum of the true sublime, which makes so many poets, and some fools. Prose poets like blank verse. I'm fond of rhyme. Good workmen never quarrel with their tools. I've got new mythological machinery, and very handsome supernatural scenery. There's only one slight difference between me and my epic brethren gone before, and here the advantage is my own, I ween. Not that I have not several merits more, but this will more peculiarly be seen. They so embellish that 'tis quite a bore their labyrinth of fables to thread through, whereas this story's actually true. If any person doubt it, I appeal to history, tradition, and to facts, to newspapers whose truth all know and feel, to plays in 5 and operas in 3 acts. All these confirm my statement a good deal, but that which more completely faith extracts is that myself, and several now in Seville, saw Juan's last elopement with the devil.
This recording is in the public domain.